Hello and welcome everyone. We're really excited to have you on our webinar today that is in partnership between Crimson Education and EssayCure. So we're looking forward to telling you a bit more about those. First, kind of what is this webinar on? It's on coronavirus and how you can support as a parent. And we're going to be diving into 3 different kind of areas. So leadership, so extracurriculars right now, what can you be doing? Essays, Christine, one of our speakers, is going to be going really into depth in the things that you should be thinking about right now. And then, of course, how that ties into college admissions. So as we're seeing people trickling in, I have a couple of things I wanted to tell you about. So I know lots of you might be familiar with Zoom. I hear that word a lot, but we love this platform for webinars for a few reasons. And one of them is that there is a chat function for you to be able to kind of interact with anybody else within the webinar. But there's also a separate question section. So you don't need to put your questions into the chat. Instead, you can put it into that question section. But let's say you do see a question that you want answered, but somebody else has already asked it, you can actually upvote it. So what I'm going to do is take the most upvoted questions towards the end of the webinar and make sure that our speakers can really go ahead and answer them. Another section that you'll see here are polls. So this is going to be really helpful for us to know a bit more about you. So we have a poll out right now. What year in high school are you, or is your student essentially? So please go ahead and start filling that out, and we can tailor the content specifically for your grade level too. So again, yes, please fill out the polls throughout. It's very helpful. If you have any questions, throw it in. We would love to continue to hear from all of you and make sure that this is as interactive as possible and as useful for you as possible too. So without further ado, really excited to be introducing our 2 speakers today. So Bob is the head of strategy at Crimson. And when we say strategy, we mean strategy for your student, their profile, what they should be doing. So he heads a team of strategists, which is our equivalent of counselors, that work with your student throughout high school or even as young as middle school. We have a separate program for that all the way through the application and admissions time period. So Bob went to Michigan, Ann Arbor, where he majored in cellular and molecular biology. You know, we have a lot of students interested in science and the pre-med path, which is something that Bob has a lot of experience with. Bob was actually a former high school guidance counselor. So that was one of the first places that he really started to learn more about this strategic support for students. And he's been with Crimson for several years, but you know, he actually had admissions consulting experience within Shanghai, which is one of the most competitive admissions markets out there. So he kind of learned with the most competitive and now helps students around this time zone, so East Coast, West Coast, etc. He does head all of strategy at Crimson, so we're really grateful to have him here today. And his students have gotten into several top schools, including the Ivies, UC Berkeley, and more. And then also very excited to be introducing Christine. So Christine is coming to us from one of our partner organizations, EssayCure. So here at Crimson, you know, we don't often partner with external companies, but Christine has really stood out to us as being absolutely incredible at what she does. So again, very happy to have her guidance here today. So she holds a bachelor's in English as well as a master's in journalism. So just kind of that master writer. And what's pretty cool too is that she is a certified professional photographer. So I think photography in its own right is a way to tell a story too. And then her writing and her images have been published in local and national newspapers, magazines, online. She's actually taught as a college professor, both undergraduate communications and English courses at the University of Phoenix on multiple campuses. And she was the lead faculty there for communication. So again, you know, whether it's the keyboard or a camera, you know, Christine's just really a master storyteller. And And then for some background on kind of our two organizations, Crimson is a global education consulting firm. So our philosophy, it really is centered around helping a student stand out through the things that they're genuinely interested in. So we work with students at younger ages to develop their strategy, that narrative, especially helping them foster leadership skills throughout the process. So when they actually get to college campuses, they are ready to go and really succeed there and then in their future careers or graduate schools. So we do this in multiple ways, and I'm happy to kind of talk more about that towards the end of the seminar. But we personalize our approach for every student. All these photos here are not stock photos. They're actually all photos of students we've helped. So we have a lot of case studies. So when we get a chance to meet you, we can tell you about a student whose path may have been similar to yours as well. And we've had really extraordinary results of getting our students into top schools. So lots of great articles you can check out about us and our philosophy. And one more plug I'll say here is that we have the largest YouTube channel on what life is like at top colleges. So especially as people are in shelter in place right now, definitely encourage you to check that out. And then Christine will absolutely be telling us more about EssayCure, but in short, they provide online courses in academic writing. And this is for middle school, high school, as well as undergraduate students. EssayCure is in its 4th year, and they have a program called Write My College Application Essay. So that has helped a lot of students get into their undergrad choices. They're very focused on writing in particular and making sure that the student's voice comes out. So what are we going to be talking about today? So we'll hear from Bob on kind of why leadership matters in admission. So thinking again of what you can be doing as a parent right now, fostering the right skills for your student. We're then going to go into skills that you need to succeed or your student needs to succeed, and then how to actually kind of launch things and get on that right path. So yeah, I will pass it over to Bob now.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Anjali. Super excited to talk to everybody today about leadership within college admissions, but also specifically tailored to kind of the atmosphere that we're in right now and how we here at Crimson advise students on, navigating this COVID environment and giving examples of some projects that our students are working on currently to kind of take advantage of the situation and make the best of it in order to move forwards. So first, I think, when we work with a student here at Crimson, when a student comes to us, right, one of their first questions is always, how do I increase my leadership potential, or how do I get involved in more kind of leadership opportunities? And that, of course, is at the core of what we do. As Anjali mentioned earlier, we here at Crimson, our core philosophy is really helping students excel at the things that they're passionate about. But first, where does this idea of leadership come from and why is it important? So I think in order to understand that, we have to rewind a bit, take a step back, and first understand exactly how applications within the US system are read, right, by admissions officers. And it's really important that, all of this information that we're sharing comes from not only the students that we have worked with, but also, we employ a number of former admissions officers as well, right, who've distinguished themselves at schools such as Harvard and Stanford and top public universities, Berkeley, Michigan, for example, right? So, all of this is very much verified, right, by, the information they've given us on how they read students and what they pick up on and what's important. So in terms of top universities and how they break down the components of the application process to decide upon a student's admission, they look at a couple of things, right? And when we understand these things, it'll become clearer to us in terms of, in a coronavirus universe, right, the situation we all live in now, how do I maximize my time, my students' time, my son or daughter's time, right, while considering these weightings and having these in mind while deciding priorities? How do I choose between prioritizing academics versus extracurriculars and essays? And then finally, which is probably the most important question, how do I differentiate myself, right, as one of the tens of thousands of students affected by the virus? So first, what do we know? And we know that this is generally the application weighting that is used by most top US universities, right? Maybe give or take a couple of percentage points here or there, but generally this application weighting system will apply to most top US schools. 40% of what's important within the application process and what admissions officers focus on are academics. Today, we are mostly talking about extracurricular activities and, of course, application essays, but it needs to be reinforced that academics are the single most important thing, right, within the admissions process. So, yes, we're focusing on the latter two today, right, but still, academics are the most important thing. And when we say academics, we mean, of course, your academic transcripts, the quality of the courses that you've taken, the difficulty of the courses, right? How they align with what you've studied, the course choices that you've made, and also, of course, testing as well. So either the SAT or the ACT, and also SAT subject tests. Close to around 30% of what is being read and evaluated is going to be the extracurricular activities and your leadership within those extracurricular activities. So I will focus on that in the next section. And then at the end, Christine will tell us more about application essays, right? And how these are evaluated within the context of applications. So question what we always ask ourselves when we're working with students, helping them refine their profiles, how do we stand out, right, when it comes to extracurricular activities, especially when we have many students who attend high schools where there are a ton of clubs, right, or students are doing the same types of things and students all want to apply to very competitive majors. How is it that students can stand out? And also important to keep in mind when we say stand out, it also has to be, kind of understood within the context of how admissions officers read applications, right? And what it boils down to is all 4 years of your academic extracurricular achievements will be read in mere minutes, right? And this is true at most top schools. We'd love to think, right, that admissions officers will spend time diving into each nuance, right, each sentence, each point that a student makes on their application, right? But sometimes, that just simply is not true, right? A school like UCLA, for example, receives 120,000 applications per year. It is just not possible, right, for an admissions officer to dive into each and every application, right, and give it, an hour's worth of review every essay, every sentence, every activity super carefully, right, and with nuance. And so what that means is that students truly have to stand out. They have to have activities, they have to have essays that really jump out, right? And have a narrative that really jumps out as well. So that, there's no time that's spent for the admissions officer to ask themselves questions on, what has the student truly done with their time? What are they really passionate about? What have they accomplished within these activities? But the answers to those questions and the way that the student portrays their experiences has to really jump off the page at you. So in terms of launching leadership initiatives, how we help our students, kind of our philosophy here at Crimson, and what we've done with our students. We look at the three kind of what we would call the three pillars of extracurricular development here at Crimson. So when a student comes to us, whether they're in ninth grade, whether they're in 10th grade, 11th grade, or even in middle school, right? The first thing that we do with them is exploration into their passions, right? Really understanding, what they currently enjoy. Of course, we want to understand what their goals are eventually, what their college goals are. I want to get into MIT to study computer science. I want to go to Berkeley to study, economics, right? But, first is just understanding, is that what they're truly passionate about, right? And that I think is gleaned from, asking them, talking to them, having conversations with, how do you spend your free time, right? When you come from school, right? What is the first thing that you do? What makes you happy? If you have some free time on the weekend or, before you do your homework, after you do your homework, right? What excites you? And is really understanding, what the student is truly passionate about and whether or not that aligns with the goals that they have in mind, right? What they want to accomplish within the college application process. And it's through this type of exploration that we also begin to understand what the students' strengths are, right? So, we may have students who are very, very talented communicators, such as Christine, for example, right? They just enjoy communicating, maybe across all different mediums, right? Not just, written communication, but, through art, through pictures, through photography, right? And we try to help them understand how they can apply these strengths to their passions. Sometimes, for example, our students, do different things that would be stronger if they combined the strengths of their passions in one activity to another. And you'll see that as an example in some of the projects that we'll present to you as well. But for some of our students, they may see, let's say, music or photography or writing as very disparate and not connected to their interests or their academic passions in, let's say, economics or computer science, right, or business. But that's not the case, right? Of course, all of those previous strengths, all of those passions can be combined into extracurricular activities and leadership as well, right? And it's very important for us here to help students analyze their strengths, right, and how they can apply those strengths to their entire portfolio of extracurricular activities, not just thinking about each extracurricular activity as just like a singular standalone thing that they do. And then the final aspect of this, the third pillar that is probably the hardest to focus on, the hardest to improve, is really helping our students elevate the impact and the achievement that they have within their current extracurricular activities. So, this is the hardest because many students do a lot of things, right? But not many students do the things that they do very, very well, right? So elevating impact and achievement is really showing admissions officers, right, exactly what the student has done, what impact have they achieved, right? How many students have they reached? How much money have they raised, right? How many articles have they written within their extracurricular activities that they've done in high school, right? And this, I think, is where, Crimson truly shines, right, in helping students really scale their activities, right? Instead of having a club of 5 people at school, right, expanding that to a club of 25 people at their high school, but also in their region as well, right, is really giving the students the advice for them to be able to connect with others, find like-minded students, and expand their projects, and perhaps even enter competitions, have challenges, right, that they didn't know about before. So these are kind of our 3 pillars of extracurricular development. And when we work with students here, is what we're constantly thinking about and helping students develop their extracurricular activities. And for a lot of students, we also help them to understand the different types of leadership, right? I think for many students also, they have a very narrow view of what leadership can be or what leadership is comprised of. Maybe it's one or the other, right? Maybe sometimes when we think of leadership, students think of, leadership can only mean, right? I'm starting an initiative, I'm starting a club from scratch, right? Like, no club, no project currently exists. So to be a leader, I must start that, right? And in order to demonstrate the impact of my leadership, right, I must be able to kind of describe that with numbers, right? I went from a club of 5 to 25 people. Last year, the Honor Society raised $500, but under my leadership, the club raised $1,700, right? But also there exists entrepreneurship as well, right? And plenty of students distinguish themselves in entrepreneurship. They make impact within existing clubs and activities as well, right? So it doesn't necessarily just have to be that students have to start something new. Scaling a club, recruiting more students is very valuable as well, and also joining nonprofit activities, joining other clubs in a student's area of interest, exploring and developing themselves, right, is also a form of leadership. I think that the best students that we work with, the best students that we see, are able to expertly balance both of these, right? You cannot just, there aren't enough clubs out there where uh, one student can be a leader of just one club, right? There have to be clubs where there are students who are followers as well, right? And so for Crimson students and for students I think who are very successful in the college application process, right? They're able to do both of these, probably within the activities that they're most passionate about, right? And where students look to them for guidance. They are a leader. They're displaying their entrepreneurial abilities, right? But then within other school clubs, ones where they can really use their particular strengths to improve a certain aspect of the club, they're developing their entrepreneurship, right? They're looking to their strengths constantly to just improve, the inner workings of a club. So that kind of takes us to how extracurriculars were impacted during the current COVID crisis. What can students be doing in order to, quote unquote, maybe salvage some of their extracurricular involvement? But also, I think, many of our students have found ways actually to advance their extracurricular profile or to even improve, right? And I think it's, this idea that the most creative, right? The most, diligent students will always find a way or an opportunity, right, even in today's environment, right, to be able to improve on their extracurricular activities. So I think first and foremost is maybe thinking of more, lower hanging fruit, right? Which means that what are certain things that you do that can absolutely be done online, right? I think one of the, maybe in today's workforce, one of the, questions that people are now asking themselves is, I can do my job very well at home, right? From work from home. Why is it necessary that in the future do I have to work in an office, right? Or how much of my work can be done from home? And I think students should be asking themselves almost the exact same thing, right? Why is it, for example, that I have to work out with my teammates on the soccer field, right? Or why is it that I have to participate in a debate with another student or practice that skill, right, in person, sitting across from each other, or in a classroom? Plenty of these things, right, just in the way that we work, I think, can also be transitioned online as well. So I think for most of our students, first it's looking at what are the things that you would have been doing in school, your weekly routine, soccer practice, debate practice, clubs that you meet with, volunteering that you do, the classes that you take outside of school. What are some of these things that you can still do online, right? And it may just take a bit of pushing other students, may take a bit of pushing the teachers or mentors who are involved with these types of clubs to allow you to hold these online, right? And in many cases, of course, everybody's sitting at home, plenty of people are bored enough that like this is very exciting, right? It may just take one student to say, hey, like, we haven't had MUN, MUN hasn't met since school ended or school was, we left school in March. But honestly, we can do all of these things online, right? We can still have our discussions. We can still have, a virtual conference. Why don't we do that, right? And it may just take one student really to kind of get the ball rolling on these types of activities. Um, there are many students also who were planning some sort of event, right? Maybe a physical event, a physical seminar, a physical fundraiser. I don't think there's anything that says that these types of events cannot be held virtually, of course, right? There are many events I think that can absolutely be adapted to being held virtually, right? In fact, it probably makes logistics of organizing the event much easier if the student can do it online. In many cases, having renting a space, a physical space, for example, getting the permission to do so, setting a time, inviting students, having students travel from all over to come attend your event is a logistical nightmare, right? But having something virtually online, you set a time, you create a Zoom classroom or whatever, it's super simple, right? So, many of our students shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that, they were planning to hold things in person, but now it might even be easier if it's done online. And then finally, a lot of upskilling yourself, right? We advise our students to really just look inwards, right? And use this time wisely. I think at the end of the day, what colleges will be looking at is, how did students weather this situation, right? Whether that's, sure, making sure that, your club runs and creating an event, right? But it also could just be, I've always wanted to improve my Spanish, right? Or, I've always learned, I've heard the other week, right? I've always been meaning to learn how to play the ukulele, right? And that's something that I've put off for many years, or, I haven't had time, and students have plenty of time at home now, right? And I think, you know, controlling your own time, your schedule, right? That definitely shows a little bit of leadership and initiative as well, right? So, there are plenty of things that students can be doing that don't require others as well, right? Improving themselves, looking inward, right? Working on skills that they haven't really gotten around to developing, but now they have the time to do. There's also, of course, the possibility of finding a lot of opportunities online. There are students, thousands, hundreds of thousands of students around the world who are looking to connect with like-minded individuals. And I think the current environment, gives us an opportunity to look outward, right, and cast a wider net than that we would have before. Previously, maybe students who were looking to organize like-minded students, and they were looking to organize a club, right, or an activity, would only be looking within their school or only looking through within their local community, right? But now that everybody is stuck at home, right, students are looking and casting a far wider net. Maybe there are students all around the world, right, as far as some other countries, Russia, South Korea, Singapore, who are working on something very similar to what you're interested in, right? And you can involve others in forming an interest group. Potentially, there are opportunities for students to join online interest groups, right, and cast a wider net, to talk with other like-minded students, to advance their ideas, right, to learn more about a particular subject, to get advice potentially on clubs that they wish to run in the future. There are online volunteering opportunities as well. I don't think volunteering, let's say, for example, volunteering necessarily means, students have to travel to some place to, build a house, or, volunteer at a soup kitchen on weekends. There are plenty of very valuable volunteering initiatives and impact that students can make online, sitting at a computer, right? For example, potentially like translating very important documents for students who are working on a second language or they're bilingual, right? And that can make plenty of impact on others as well. And then, of course, there are going to be online conferences, right? Many of these things, as I spoke about before, can absolutely be done online, right? And many other students are trying to, many organizations or students are trying to transition their conferences that would have been held physically into things that happen online, right? There are some events or mediums, I think, that lend themselves to be held online with really very seamlessly, in fact, right? Like a hackathon, for example. So students could potentially look to join some of these. In terms of some activities that students can do in order to display their own kind of ingenuity and creativity and leadership, they can absolutely contact professors, right? And perhaps research or work on an independent project, an academic project, remotely. For many of professors, of course, right, they have been stuck at home, right, not teaching classes physically, right? They may welcome some contact from a very engaged high school student who's asking for guidance in terms of how to explore an academic subject. We've had great success with some students who've reached out to professors during this period of time. The second one also that, maybe Christine could talk a little bit more about later, but, a lot of our students, like what they can do right now is to write, right? Many of our students are very talented. They might be talented creative writers, right? And there's a lot of time now for them to hone that craft, to write essays, to practice, to enter essay competitions. Another example of a competition or an extracurricular activity that does not have to be done in person. A lot of our students are writing for their local online newspapers, for even like local, let's say like regional city newspapers or publications as well. Writing about their thoughts and their situation from a student's perspective, for example. These things are super valuable as well. Students can take more time to learn about potential careers, but also learn about future colleges that they're interested in as well, right? Contacting companies, see if they have opportunities for remote internships, setting up conversations with people to learn more. I think people are much more flexible now that there is certainly a work from home atmosphere. There may be people at certain companies who are very willing to kind of lend their time to help students understand what they currently do, what their work environment is like, and may even let them shadow. And then kind of of connected to what I talked about before is personal projects and personal passions. Starting that app that the student always wanted to work on, right? Launching a nonprofit or startup. These are things that students can work on. And we have 3 examples here of 3 projects that Crimson students are currently working on. And some of these I think were started perhaps like maybe before the COVID crisis. And some of these are, I think like pivots from students in that they were trying to work on something before, and they were able to change the structure and the kind of path of their project, right? Because they found something more useful to do. So the first, oh, I'm sorry. So this slide first. At the end of the day, what students are hoping to demonstrate to colleges is their ability to handle, to adapt, and improve the situation for themselves, right, and those around them within this crisis. If we think of, eventually the essays that a student will have to write, right? A lot of times, if it's a why college essay, students might have to talk about hypothetical situations or things that they want to do in the future or how they would handle certain crises, right? But, this opportunity, right, I think gives students the ability to actually show, right? Not just think about what they would do, but actually show, right? The impact that students have on the world around them, and the students around them as well, and how they, help other students through this crisis, right? And how they're able to kind of utilize their creativity, their entrepreneurship, their entrepreneurial abilities in order to create new initiatives and also develop their personal projects. So the 3 projects that we had in mind to share, number 1 is humans of the coronavirus. So what one of our students is doing, I believe that this student is in China, I think, is they are interviewing students from all around the world, right? The 25 most affected nations, around the world, asking them probing questions just about, how they're feeling, how the media is portraying the COVID crisis within their countries, right? What are their tips for kind of managing self-isolation and also just getting to know them, right? And the purpose of this project is really to, show this crisis within the lens of, ordinary students, ordinary people from all around the world, right? To give people, the ability to relate to others, right? Who are having who are having a very similar experience. We have a student who's working on a fundraising art initiative. So I believe that, prior to this, the student was already working on, working with a local artist in order to paint a couple of pieces and then auction these pieces off. But of course, this current COVID crisis gives this student, more purpose, right? Which is to raise money to buy ventilators for a local hospital. And then finally, we also have a student who, saw very early on a shortage for hand sanitizer, right? Something very simple that, I think that was just sold out everywhere. So the student, very interested in science, researched the various components, was able to source these components, right? And then just assemble small packs from home and be able to distribute these to low-income communities struggling to get supplies during this time of crisis and be able to provide them with hand sanitizer. Great. So I have shared a couple of examples of what students can do, how students can think about their extracurricular activities, and some examples of what students have done. I'll now pass it to Christine, who will talk about a very, very important aspect of the college application process as well, which is how to portray all these experiences in essays.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm super excited at the crossover in our conversation because we have an entire bonus lesson on show me, don't tell me. And it fits right in with the work that you're doing, which is exciting. So, for many students, writing the essay is the most daunting task in the college application process. And it's for good reason, because they've spent most of their academic lives in one rhetorical mode. And the college application essay is their first experience writing, really kind of wrestling in an unfamiliar method of communication. Academic writing, it's any writing that fulfills a requirement for an assignment. And it uses the foundations for rhetorical modes, which are ways of communicating effectively. And we use rhetorical modes to convey ideas that are descriptive, analytical, persuasive, or critical. And English majors like me, We get entire degrees around studying this stuff. High schoolers don't have English degrees, and not every undergraduate student studies English, but all college students write. In fact, there's studies that show that the average college freshman will write 92 pages of essay. So at EssayCure, we demystify academic writing for students because it's such an important component, not only to get you in, but once you're in, you have to keep using it. So I want to talk a little bit about leadership. Remember how in high school you wrote those 5-point hamburger essays? Those are the essays that have an intro, a conclusion, at least 3 main ideas. Tell me what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you just told me. So in college, these are called persuasive essays, and writing about leadership employs the same critical component as writing an effective conclusion in a persuasive essay. Those of you who mastered this type of essay writing in high school, you already know that the easiest way to level up a persuasive essay is to include a challenge in your conclusion that asks the reader to take action or make a change. And that same principle applies to writing about your leadership experience. I mean, think about it. Admissions officers don't want to hear about what you think, hope for, or believe. It sounds great and all, but it's hypothetical. They want to read about what you actually did with these thoughts and hopes and beliefs. And I know that that's a big component of what Crimson is already doing to work with their students. Your leadership experience, it really means nothing if it was only to check a box, but if you can show me what it motivated you to do, then we've got an essay. I'm going to transition here to talk about the 5 most common mistakes that students make in their college application essay. And mistake number 1 is beginning and ending with rough draft. So many students begin and end at rough draft. And I can see it immediately when I open the essay. These are the steps in the writing process, and this is what academic writing looks like in college. Notice all of the steps that a student ignores by beginning and ending at rough draft. Once you know what you're looking for, the missing steps are pretty easy to spot. And trust me, even if they don't have English degrees, admissions officers, they read tens of thousands of essays, and they can see this. Students ignore critical academic components by starting at rough draft. You don't sit down to write a rough draft. Academic writing happens during the steps in the process. So we know that you know how to write. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know how to write. This isn't about the writing, it's about the thinking and the doing. It's academic writing. College is all about learning new and complex concepts and ideas. Your job as a college student is going to be to demonstrate that you understand what your professors are teaching you. And many times you're going to have to demonstrate synthesis of material by writing an academic essay. Writing an academic essay requires a solid understanding of its essential components. And to the trained eye, it's pretty obvious when all you're doing is floundering around trying to write a rough draft. Okay, mistake number 2 is a preoccupation with mechanics. When students come to me asking if I will edit their essay, it's a dead giveaway that they don't understand the steps in the writing process. Why? Well, look where editing falls in the steps. Elizabeth was one of those students. As a high schooler, she was a good writer. She didn't come to me asking if I'd show her how to write academic essays. She came to me asking if I would edit her college application essay. Grammatically, Elizabeth's essay was perfect. I didn't find a single comma splice or a noun-verb agreement problem. But curiously, what I did find, she spent 477 words writing her introduction in a college application essay that had to be 650 words max. So 73% of Elizabeth's essay was not even focused on answering the question posed in the prompt. And she was in the wrong rhetorical mode. She considered herself a good writer, and by high school standards, that was true, but I've got an English degree and I taught college essay writing. Academic writing at the undergraduate level, it requires far more than just that last step. I taught Elizabeth how to write her college application essay by using the same techniques taught in academic writing at the undergraduate level. I call it communicate, navigate, punctuate, and we use that alliteration to help students remember the process. And what happened? Her Common App essay that she wrote in our course got her into her Reach School, Cornell, and it earned her a total of $140,000 in scholarship offers. So look, editing is important, but it's only a fraction of the overall process. Editing is the polish that proves to the reader that the writer is educated, and it's so important that it's given a step all to itself, but that step is at the very end. Like, don't brush your teeth before eating. Okay, mistake number 3. A testimonial is a public tribute that testifies to someone's character. Many students love, admire, and respect a family member, coach, teacher, mentor, someone who's made a tremendous difference for them along the way. Writing a touching testimony tells admissions officers how grateful you are to have such a person in your life, but does it answer the question of what makes you such a unique and coveted addition to their campus community? No. Look, these testimonials are worth writing, so write it. Only write it as a heartfelt thank you note and brighten that person's day with your gratitude. Truth be told, you probably should have already written that note anyhow, right? Okay, mistake number 4 is a biggie. Letting your parents write your essay, purchasing an essay online, using an essay that worked for a friend. There's a number of reasons why these are mistakes, beginning with violations of student codes of conduct and academic integrity, which is easily detected by plagiarism software. And for all you parents out there, it's a parenting fail. Ethical issues aside, it defeats the whole purpose of the college application essay, for the college to get to know you through the nuances expressed in your own voice and experiences that you choose to share in illustrating your interest in whatever the particular academic program is that you want to study or the campus that you're applying to. Our students are often surprised by their own brilliance when they discover how powerful the technique is of using the steps in the writing process. So parents, don't cheat your child of this opportunity, and students, don't cheat yourselves of this opportunity, because nobody can tell your story like you can. Mistake number 5, not answering the question posed in the essay prompt. I know, you'd think this would go without saying, but you'd be surprised. This is the one thing that must be in your Common App essay. You must answer the question. And you not only need to be able to answer the question in the essay, but you have to be able to verbalize that answer in one succinct sentence, 25 words or less. If you can't verbalize the summary of your answer for me, then I don't know how you're going to write an entire academic essay on it. Academic writing doesn't need to be intimidating. In fact, in my experience, students are grateful and super relieved to learn that it does not mean draw from the depths of your soul to create the great American novel. It's not creative writing, it's a technique, and learning this technique completely disarms students. Once students no longer have to wrestle the writing portion, the emphasis returns to where it should be in college, absorbing and understanding new and complex concepts and ideas. We're not all writers and we're not all English majors, but we all communicate and we all write. I created Essay Cure to demystify the steps so that students can go on to study whatever interests them and yet still successfully communicate what they're learning, especially if it's writing an academic essay that's going to factor into their undergraduate grades.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both Bob and Christine, for all of those insights. I think it was really helpful to hear you break kind of the pieces step by step in terms of extracurriculars, online, leadership, and then the essay itself. I think one of the big things I'd love to say for everyone listening is that this is kind of a process that can feel really daunting or stressful. But if you approach it in a way that really breaks it step by step and get the right mentoring and guidance, it can still be something that you explore a lot of who you are and what you enjoy doing, which can be really valuable down the line too. So in terms of kind of working with Christine, she mentioned a bit more about her program. So I am the country director for Crimson in the US, so I can tell you a little more about how Crimson works as well. So we do personalize our programs to every single student and where they are in their journey. from that point on, we match them with the very best mentors for them. So we do care a lot about personality and what someone's aspirations are. So our goal is to make sure that you have this right team around you. You know, whether you want to study physics, I saw someone in the comments really wants to study medicine, just making sure you're on the right path throughout. And we have a lot of resources as well for our students, essay banks, you know, information on kind of where you stand for the kinds of colleges you're looking for. And then, you know, I'm very grateful that we are a technology company. So even before the coronavirus hit, we have a full platform to allow us to make sure that you have a full plan of action, and we can meet with you virtually one-on-one as well. Parents, you do get a progress report with this, so you don't need to sit in on every session if you don't want to. In fact, you know, sometimes it's better to let students open up. But then you can see the notes and the to-dos and action items the student has afterwards. So what's awesome about how we've structured Crimson and our philosophies around leadership is that usually from students taking part in extracurriculars they care about, building these leadership skills, and having those interesting things about them to write compelling stories about, is that this translates into really strong acceptance rates. So this is a very, very small sample size of some of the most competitive schools. So, you know, Harvard, Stanford, Penn, et cetera, as well as one example here from the UK. They're very competitive, and they've continued to get more competitive over time, but our rates of Crimson students are much higher in terms of them getting in. And again, I do believe it is from that kind of guidance around leadership and strategy that helps quite a lot. And then, of course, we've partnered with Christine for those who want kind of that more intensive support when it comes to writing classes too. So yes, very exciting to have kind of these rates. You know, our offer letters have continued to trickle in. So just heard from someone today, they got off the wait list at Yale. Super exciting to kind of see that movement in general. So these numbers are kind of going up too. So if you do want to talk with us and see kind of if it is a mutually good fit, the first step would be to schedule some time with who we call academic advisors. And they'll come up with the right plan of action after they get to know your student. You know, what grade are they? What are they looking for? So I saw a question from a junior that was around, you know, am I too late? I'd say certainly not. Our goal is to understand where you're at and what you can be doing this summer. This is actually one of the most popular times to join, right? Juniors, you have a lot on your mind. We can give you quite a lot of help. So we'll meet with you, we'll figure out where you are, and then we can put together a plan of action kind of around what you need as well as your budget. So for those of you who do want to sign up, this first session is free. So it's really for, again, to see if it's a mutual fit. So to sign up, it's crimson.as.me/college-apps. So you can go there on that link right now, or we can kind of help you in terms of scheduling that as well. So we'll send over an email afterwards and can actually introduce you to the advisor you'll be speaking to. Our advisors speak a lot of different languages. They're all incredible. So please don't hesitate to find a time. Here are some of the examples: Bilal, Joe, Nick, and Shirley. So we have Arabic speakers, Spanish speakers, Mandarin speakers, etc. So you can, you know, find someone who speaks your language most often within Crimson. And before we go to Q&A, just two things. We do have a couple of webinars coming up. So one of them is an open house just for you to get to know more about our program. You know, we have things like research placement, internship placement for the summer. So a lot of good ways for you to continue to boost your profile. And also have a webinar on your future in STEM. So this is going to be really for those who are targeting engineering schools, comp sci, pre-med path, PSMD programs, all of that. So again, we'll send an email with some more information on how to sign up for future webinars, and we would love to meet you at the open house. So now I'm going to turn over to some of the questions people have asked through this kind of webinar, and please continue to throw in some answers. So one of them: if I was to study medicine at a top university, what would the interviewers want to see in my application? What extracurriculars what would make me stand out? So Bob, I'll first pass this to you, and then Christine, perhaps you can talk a bit about essays as well.
So this is specifically just about medicine, right? So are we talking about medicine as a graduate program, or are we talking about pre-med, let's say, for example, or an accelerated medical program, right? So I think that, in terms of the applicants that Crimson works with, right, or the students that we see who are interested in these types of pathways, most of them have excellent grades and test scores already, right? Of course, applying to whether it's a top school to study, some sort of science, an accelerated medical program, right? Incredibly rigorous route. So academics first, right? And most students have like very, very strong academic and test score backgrounds, right? In terms of extracurricular activities, students do a very wide range of things, right? I think that, now medical programs more than ever really value kind of varied experiences from students and really value communication, right? The ability for a doctor, for example, to, talk to a patient, to break good news, to break bad news, right? Like that communication piece is super, super important, right? But I think in terms of extracurricular activities as well, right? We really want to see kind of exposure and commitment to this specific discipline and this specific track, right? Beyond just, maybe volunteering at a hospital once in a while, right? We really want to see students know like what they are getting themselves into, right? A lot of these students have spent, hundreds of hours volunteering, shadowing, right? Working in labs, and are just exposed to every possible kind of like angle and kind of corner of healthcare in general, right? Not just being a doctor, right? But just healthcare in general, right? And so, they can really kind of speak to those experiences and, showcase that they are very committed and understand, right, kind of the state of healthcare, right, and what they want to get, kind of like what they want to get themselves into. Maybe I can, ask Christine to speak about it more from an essay or communications perspective.
Well, I would say that they would start with everything that you're doing, and then they would do what we've already talked about, which is they have to show, not tell. And in order to show, not tell, they've got to get out in the world and do something that they can write about. So that's really the most important component, is getting yourself out there to get the experience that you need so that then you have fodder to write your essay.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Going over to another question, which is better, the Common App or the Coalition app? So I'll send this over to you, Bob.
Yeah, I don't think like necessarily one or the other is better, right? It really depends on the list of schools that you apply to and, making it easier for yourself, right? I mean, if let's say, for example, 9 out of the 10 schools that you're applying to are on the Common App, but only 5 out of the 10 are on the Coalition app, right? Don't make things more difficult for yourself by using both, right? Or using the Coalition app and then having to fill out multiple different applications. Use the one that's, kind of most gets you to be able to apply to more of the schools that you're interested in. A couple of years ago, when the Coalition application launched, it had a lot of very revolutionary features, I think, right? But also in the years since then, the Common App has stolen most of these features as well. So it is no longer as revolutionary, I think, as the original idea. So I don't really see a great advantage, to using the Coalition app, right? It's really just, what are the schools you're applying to? What application portal are they on, right? And what allows you to do, the most amount of work, right, that is submitted to most of the schools that you're applying to.
Yeah. Great. And we have a question. When people do their own research or write their own independent essays, do they need to get it published? If you don't get it published, how will the interviewer know about your essays or independent learning? So Christine, I know you've been published a couple of times. So do you want to take this one?
Yeah, let me see the question again. Okay, so getting published is, it's not quite as easy as it sounds. It takes a lot more than just one sentence to make that happen. But I think that, Bob did give you some examples of ways that you could start publishing. There's a lot of local places that might be looking for some of the work that you're writing, either local newspapers. There's lots of local magazines. I think that it would be really important to start small and start local. and get your byline in print so that then you can reach out to some other larger publications if that's the direction you want to go with your essays.
Yeah, being published is definitely quite impressive if you are able to make it happen. Yeah, definitely something to aspire to, absolutely.
I'd also like to throw in there too, don't be afraid of rejection. There's an awful lot of writers out there who've collected hundreds of rejection letters. And if you know that you have to get to 300 rejections to get to published, every rejection is just one rejection letter closer to your end goal. So don't let one rejection letter slow you down. That's not a problem.
Yeah, definitely very true when it comes to applying to jobs too. I think there's something like for every 100 cover letters, you might hear back from 10, and fewer interview, all of that. All right, another question is starting a business an extracurricular. So I'll send that over to you, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can speak about this, but I personally think you're the best person to talk about this as well, Anjali. Absolutely, right? Business is an extracurricular activity. I think maybe I can speak more about it in a general sense, right? A lot of things are extracurricular activities, especially if we take the Common App, definition of what an extracurricular activity is. In fact, there are many things that students don't often think of as commitments or extracurricular activities that absolutely are, right? Familial obligations, number one, are the most common thing, right? Like a lot of times students, you have an ill parent or you have an ill grandparent or something like that, and you must commit 3 hours a week to caring for that person, right? That is absolutely an extracurricular activity that demonstrates a lot of things, right? Commitment, right? Leadership, right? But also care as well, right? And I think it's, many students who have to do that, right? I'm sure they're more mature than their peers who don't have to bear those types of responsibilities. Second type of thing that is also extracurricular activity, a part-time job, right? Lots of students work part-time jobs. Again, it's like if you are handling cash each and every day, right? That's a lot of responsibility, especially for a 17 or 18-year-old student. So yeah, all of these things are definitely valuable experiences, right? And can be portrayed as extracurricular activities. I don't know, maybe Anjali, if you want to speak more about business as an extracurricular activity.
Yeah, so that was a huge part of my own high school profile. So I had become really passionate around helping high school students learn about social entrepreneurship. So ways that you could actually figure out solutions to problems that you saw, especially when volunteering for schools. So I wanted to just kind of tell more people about social entrepreneurship. And so created a DVD-based curriculum for schools and targeted schools that had mandatory volunteer hours. So don't want to date myself too much, but this was when DVDs were quite popular, so a little bit ago. And I was kind of really figuring out, how do we order these DVDs, how to send it to schools across the country, how to get in touch with them. So it was a really great experience for me, and I would say it was quite formative throughout high school. Now, when it came to my actual applications, my essays were not just about, I started this and then it scaled, et cetera. Instead, I talked about a really challenging moment within starting this business, about coming up with the right name for it and how I had to work with a lot of my peers to get their consensus on it. And I really failed at it at first. I thought because I had started it, I should be allowed to name it. So my essay, kind of like a lot of what Christine said, it was touching a lot more on something that was a very impactful moment in my life and has truly changed my leadership style to date, versus it just being like, hey, I did all these things in high school. So in short, that's kind of my own example, but we do see a lot of students successfully start businesses around their passions. And it does look pretty incredible if it is something where you're able to grow it and get impact, and even scale it beyond just kind of your hometown or your region, perhaps. Christine, anything you would add there?
Well, I think what you described is it wasn't just a list of your accomplishments of a student, your essay, which would have been the 5-point hamburger essay. It was you venturing into kind of a new rhetorical mode, for high school students of talking about yourself and selling yourself. And, the college application process is like the ultimate job interview. And a lot of students are not super comfortable selling themselves. And this essay that you have to write, it does have to sell yourself. And so you were approaching a topic, you're describing, where you felt like you should get to name your own business, and you had some challenges with that. And how did you respond to those challenges? And it's storytelling, but it's also selling yourself. It's telling, I think your Crimson counselors are probably helping you to flesh out, but we do this at Essay Cure as well, fleshing out the right stories to tell. Because sometimes, even though it meant a lot to you, it's journalism 101, just because it happened to me doesn't make it interesting. You want to tell the right story because, in one of the very first slides, when they talked about you have just mere minutes for all of your information to get absorbed. You need for that story to also morph into a personal statement that covers a lot of different areas in your application.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I thank everybody so much for joining today. I know we are at the top of the hour. Special thank you to Bob and Christine for all of your insights. We will be sending you an email after this with more information about how to get in touch with either of us. So thank you all, and best of luck on your applications too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.